Right now, in every single county in America, a full-time worker earning minimum wage cannot afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Somewhere tonight, a worker is probably opening a pay stub and watching the rent disappear before it ever really counted as hers. 130 years ago, one company owned every worker's house, church, and grocery store, and took the rent before a single paycheck ever reached their hands. That company is long gone. But is your own paycheck really any different before you ever see your own money? May 11th, 1894. Pullman, Illinois. Factory whistles cut through coal smoke at 6 a.m., and 2,000 men walk toward gates they no longer trust. Behind them, brick row houses sit in tidy, silent rows, a model town, built and owned by one man. Somewhere inside one of those houses, in a home they don't legally control, the rent is already gone. Vanished before it's even seen. That's not something that happened only to men in 1894. It keeps happening. For many people, something is pulled from the account the moment the paycheck lands. Rent, a loan payment, an insurance premium, a subscription, sometimes before the notification is even opened. You've probably done that math before you even opened your banking app, subtracting the fixed costs before deciding what's actually yours. That feeling of never quite catching up isn't a personal failure, and it isn't a sign you're managing money badly. It's the shape of a system working exactly as it was built to work. According to Debt.com's 2026 budgeting survey, 48% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck today. Nearly half the country, watching money move before they get a real say in where it goes. Most of us never chose this arrangement. We were simply born into a financial system where automatic deductions happen quietly, in the background, long before a single dollar reaches a decision we actually make. That raises two questions worth sitting with. How did a system get built where your money is claimed before it's truly yours? And is there a way to actually get ahead of it, to close that gap instead of just living inside it? To answer both, we have to go back, past your last pay stub, past your landlord, back to the town where this pattern first got written into American life. The archaeology begins here. 14 miles south of Chicago, in the spring of 1880, George Pullman broke ground on something no one in America had quite built before. An entire town, owned outright by one company. Pullman called it a model town, and for a while, the world believed him. Streets were paved and lit with gas lamps years before most American cities managed it. Workers lived in brick row houses with indoor plumbing, a luxury for laborers in 1880. There was a library, a theater, a church, a market. Visitors came from as far as Europe to study it. One European delegation reportedly called it the most perfect town in the world. But there was a condition baked into every brick. Pullman didn't sell these homes. He rented them, and only to his own employees. The church, the store, the gas line, the water, all company owned, all company priced. Order came with ownership, and ownership belonged to one man. Even the town's public spaces carried an unspoken rule. They existed at the company's discretion and could be withdrawn the same way they were granted. Then came 1893. A national economic depression swept through American industry, and Pullman's order revealed its price. The company slashed wages by roughly 25 to 30%, according to the U.S. Strike Commission's 1894 federal investigation into the events at Pullman. Nearly a third of the workforce lost their jobs outright. Here's the detail that turned frustration into fury. Rent did not fall by a single dollar. Pullman continued collecting the same rent, on the same schedule, deducted straight from paychecks before workers ever touched the money. Some families brought home a few dollars a week, after rent, barely enough for food. One worker's pay envelope, according to multiple historical accounts from the period, contained only 47 cents after deductions. Workers asked for one of two things: lower rent or higher wages. Company Vice President Thomas Wicks gave them neither, saying the company could not afford higher wages during the Depression. even as Pullman kept paying its stockholders an annual dividend near 8%, according to the historical record compiled by labor historians at the time. One Pullman resident summed up daily life bluntly: born in a Pullman house, fed from a Pullman shop, taught in a Pullman school, buried, eventually, in a Pullman cemetery, a life almost entirely enclosed inside one company's ledger. A workers' committee tried to negotiate directly. Several of its members were fired within days. That was the spark. On May 11, 1894, roughly 4,000 Pullman workers walked off the job. They weren't alone for long. The newly formed American Railway Union, led by Eugene V. Debs, voted to support the Pullman workers with a nationwide boycott, refusing to handle any train pulling a Pullman car. Within weeks, rail traffic stalled across 27 states. Estimates placed the number of participating railroad workers between 125,000 and 250,000, shutting down rail traffic across most of the country west of Chicago. The federal government's response set a precedent that would outlast the strike itself. U.S. Attorney General Richard Olney sought and obtained a court injunction against the strike, not under any labor law, but under the Sherman Antitrust Act, a statute written 2 years earlier to break up monopolies, not unions. It was the first time an antitrust law had ever been used to stop a strike. Financial history rarely records a stranger use of a law meant for something else entirely. President Grover Cleveland deployed federal troops to Chicago on July 3, 1894. The following day, Independence Day, violence broke out between strikers and soldiers. By the time the unrest ended in late July, the historical record shows as many as 30 people had died, and millions of dollars in railroad property lay destroyed. Debs was arrested, convicted of violating the injunction, and served 6 months in prison. The Supreme Court later upheld the government's use of the injunction in re Debs, 158 U.S. 564, decided in 1895, a ruling that shaped American labor law for decades, establishing that federal courts could intervene in labor disputes deemed to interfere with interstate commerce. The American Railway Union collapsed under the weight of the injunction and the arrests that followed. Most workers were eventually rehired, but without the wage increase and without the rent reduction they had asked for from the very start. And yet, in the middle of the crisis, on June 28, 1894, Congress and President Cleveland created a new federal holiday, Labor Day, a conciliatory gesture toward a labor movement the government had just moved against with troops. It's one of the strangest twin legacies in American economic history. The same year the government crushed a strike, it also gave the country a holiday to mark the very workers it had crushed. The company town survived a while longer, though more people began questioning how it worked. Economists and journalists studying the arrangement in the years that followed increasingly questioned whether any employer should also serve as landlord, grocer, and utility provider to the same workforce it paid. The pattern it proved, that a paycheck could be claimed before it ever reached the worker who earned it, did not stay buried in Illinois. Not buried, just relocated, filed into a ledger, line by line, in a building most Pullman workers never even had reason to enter. Inside the land department office, a clerk logs a name, a house number, a rent amount, before a single dollar of that worker's wages has even left the payroll window down the hall. Picture the pay envelope itself. In most American cities in 1893, a worker opened that envelope and decided, for themselves, what came next. Food first, then rent, then whatever was left. In Pullman, the choice never really existed. Rent, water, and gas charges were subtracted before the envelope was sealed. What workers held in their hands was never the full wage. It was the remainder. Here's what made it different from an ordinary landlord-tenant relationship. The same company that set your wage also set your rent, owned your grocery store, and billed your gas and water. Money left the company as a paycheck and returned to the company almost immediately through rent, utilities, and the company store. It wasn't simple employment. It was a closed loop, and the company controlled every gate along the way. And yet, for years, outsiders admired it. Visiting delegations from Europe studied Pullman as a model of enlightened industrial planning. Clean streets, indoor plumbing, a public library. Praise came easily when the loop stayed quiet. And it stayed quiet for over a decade before the Depression tested it. The scale of that loop was not small. According to research compiled by the Social Welfare History Project, roughly 2/3 of Pullman's entire workforce lived in company-owned housing. Many after foremen threatened to fire employees who didn't relocate into town. 2 out of every 3 paychecks, funneling straight back through company rent. It's worth pausing on what workers actually got in exchange. They got a clean, well-built house, but never a deed. No Pullman employee could buy the home they lived in, no matter how many years of rent they'd paid. That single detail, rent without any path to ownership, is what turned a well-designed town into a permanent dependency. Here's the counterintuitive twist historians point to. You might expect a company running that kind of closed loop to be extracting massive profit from housing alone. It wasn't, particularly. Economist Richard T. Ely, in his 1885 investigation published in Harper's New Monthly magazine, found that Pullman's housing division returned a modest profit, publicly cited by the company itself at around 6%, a normal commercial rate for the era. So that's how money works inside a closed loop like this. It isn't really about housing profit at all. The real value of the loop wasn't the rent money itself. It was control over where workers lived, who they associated with, and how much leverage they had to simply walk away. That's the mechanism worth remembering because it didn't require a conspiracy or a secret plan. The historical record shows a straightforward business structure. One employer, controlling wages and living costs at the same time, with almost no gap between the two for a worker to build financial independence in. Whether that kind of gap can ever really be closed remains the harder question, one we'll come back to before this story is over. For now, hold on to the shape of that loop, because the loop itself, wages and housing controlled by the same hand, didn't stay confined to a 19th century railway town. It resurfaces, in different forms, whenever housing and employment tighten together again. And as we're about to see, it's resurfacing right now. In Boca Chica, Texas, in May of 2025, a small community of residents, most of them employees of a nearby aerospace company, voted to incorporate their town under a new name, Starbase. It now has its own local government, its own boundaries, its own rules. It's not the only example. In Menlo Park, California, a housing development called Anton Menlo provides apartments tied to a major technology employer. In Mountain View, California, another company is developing a large residential neighborhood of its own near its headquarters. None of this is secret. It's public real estate and zoning activity reported openly. Companies responding to a housing market that has priced many of their own workers out of the surrounding area. Some of these projects include public parks and open space alongside employee housing, an echo, intentional or not, of the same model town language once used for Pullman. And that pricing out is not a feeling. It's measured. According to the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's Out of Reach 2026 report, a full-time worker needs to earn $29.19 an hour to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. The average renter in America earns $24.84 an hour. That's not a shortfall in one city. The report found that, as of 2026, a full-time minimum wage worker cannot afford a modest 2-bedroom rental anywhere in the United States, not in a single county, in any state. Look at this again, for it is the modern version of the same calculation Pullman workers made when analyzing their pay envelopes in 1893. Wages on one side, housing costs on the other. And the gap just keeps widening, no matter how many hours you work. The same report found that of the 25 most common occupations in the country, 18 pay median wages below what's needed to afford a modest 2-bedroom home at fair market rent, meaning this gap isn't a fringe experience. It touches roughly half the American workforce. This is the same mechanism we uncovered earlier, resurfacing not because any single company planned it, but because when housing and employment tighten around each other again, the closed loop reappears almost on its own. The historical record shows this pattern returning whenever two conditions line up: a housing shortage and an employer large enough to build its way around it. Pullman didn't invent that math. He simply built the first American company town large enough to make it visible. Here's where economic history offers something else besides a warning: a precedent of resistance. In 1894, the government used the Sherman Antitrust Act, a law written to break up monopolies, to break up a strike instead. It was a strange, ironic use of the law, a tool meant to protect fair competition, turned against workers simply trying to negotiate. That same legal tension, labor rights weighed against other bodies of law, has never fully disappeared from how American monetary systems and financial system history intertwine. Modern labor disputes still wrestle with where the line sits between an employer's property rights and a worker's bargaining power, a question the National Labor Relations Act attempted to settle in 1935, 4 decades after Pullman, by formally protecting the right to organize. Financial history doesn't repeat exactly, but today the underlying question, who gets to set the terms when housing, wages, and work are this tightly bound together, is the same one Pullman workers were asking in 1894. That question doesn't stay abstract for long. For one family, it was never a statistic at all. It was a name, an age, and a number on an eviction notice. The number was 47 cents. That's what one Pullman worker held in his open hand at the company paymaster's window in the spring of 1894. The entire remainder of a week's wages, after rent, water, and gas, had already been subtracted before he ever reached the counter. According to multiple historical accounts from the period, the bank teller processing his pay asked whether he wanted to put that 47 cents toward next month's rent. The worker's reply became one of the strike's most quoted lines: "If Mr. Pullman needs that 47 cents worse than I do, let him have it." He wasn't shouting. He was just done pretending the math worked. He wasn't the only one doing that math. According to Encyclopedia.com's account of the period, the wage cuts of 1893 left many Pullman families without enough money left over to properly feed or clothe their children, even with rent and basic utilities already claimed by the company first. This wasn't one unlucky household. It was the ordinary condition of an entire town, repeated street by street. That's not ancient history. It's this morning's math, run on a different set of numbers. According to NLIHC's Out of Reach 2026 state report for Texas, a full-time worker earning the state's minimum wage of $7.25 an hour would need to work 139 hours in a single week, nearly 3.5 full-time jobs, just to afford a modest one-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. There are 168 hours in a week. Sleep has to happen somewhere in the gap that's left. It isn't confined to one state either. Nationally, NLIHC's 2026 report found that 17 of the 25 most common occupations in America, including retail workers, home health aides, and administrative assistants, pay median wages below what's needed to afford even a modest one-bedroom rental. These aren't rare jobs. They're the roles that keep hospitals, stores, and warehouses running, filled by people whose essential work still doesn't clear the cost of a place to live. The historical record shows a simple, repeating shape: a wage that can't quite reach the cost of shelter, and a worker doing quiet math no one else sees. At a paymaster's window in 1894, or at a kitchen table with a phone calculator open tonight in 2026. 47 cents, 139 hours, 17 of the 25 most common jobs in the country. Different numbers, 130 years apart. Same gap. For most of that time, the answer offered has been the same one: work harder and it will close by itself. It hasn't. Not by itself. But history didn't end at Pullman's paymaster window. It kept moving, past defeat, into whatever comes after. That's where we're headed next. Whatever comes after didn't start with despair. It started with a question the Pullman workers asked, and a set of answers the following decades slowly built. Remember the question from earlier? Is there a way to actually get ahead of a system that claims your money before you do? History says yes, but not through any single dramatic gesture. It happened through tools. Some of those tools still exist, and they're available to you right now. Step 1. Free and available today. Before your next salary negotiation or job offer, look up your region's housing wage in NLIHC's Public Out-of-Reach report. It updates every year and tells you, in hard numbers, what income you actually need where you live, turning a vague financial anxiety into a specific target you can negotiate against. Step 2. Know your legal floor. The Fair Labor Standards Act sets real limits on what an employer can deduct from your paycheck. A direct legal descendant of the very question Pullman workers couldn't get answered in 1894. Knowing that floor exists changes how you read your own pay stub and gives you actual language to raise if something on it looks wrong. Step 3. Resist the single point of failure. Where you have a choice, avoid stacking housing, healthcare, and income onto the same employer. It's not always avoidable, but every point where you can diversify is a point where losing one thing doesn't cost you everything at once. The exact vulnerability the Pullman company town made structural and worth noticing in any modern arrangement that looks similar. Step 4. Collective bargaining is still standing. The tool the 1894 strikers reached for, imperfectly and at enormous cost, is still protected by federal law under the National Labor Relations Act. It looks different now. Grievance procedures, formal negotiation, legal protections against retaliation. But the underlying right to organize and negotiate collectively remains available to American workers, more than a century after Pullman workers tried it without that protection. Step 5. Read the offer, not just the number. When weighing a job offer that includes employer-provided housing or heavily bundled benefits, weigh it against a comparable cash wage alternative. Convenience has a price, and that price is sometimes flexibility. The very thing Pullman workers lost when landlord and employer became one signature. Wealth inequality narrows in small ways every time someone makes that comparison before signing, rather than after they've already moved in. None of these 5 steps rewrites the housing market overnight. But together, they do something Pullman's workers never had the chance to do. They let you see the mechanism before it closes around you, instead of after, and change what you're able to ask for before you sign anything. That's the real inheritance of 1894. Not a warning to be afraid of your employer. A blueprint for reading the fine print they hoped you wouldn't. And there's one more piece of that inheritance left to open. The part where a forgotten strike accidentally gave every American worker a day off. A day off, that's the strange gift buried inside this whole story. In the middle of crushing a strike, the federal government created the holiday that, today, marks the very thing Pullman workers were fighting for. Recognition that labor has worth beyond what a paycheck says it's worth. Remember the county-by-county math? No minimum wage worker able to afford a 2-bedroom home anywhere in America? That's not a modern accident. It's the same gap Pullman's rent office created, resurfacing wherever wages and housing drift apart again. And the worker watching rent disappear before it ever felt like hers? She has a name now, even if history never recorded it. Every family that did that same quiet math in 1894 and tonight. The company that owned the house, the church, the store, that was Pullman, Illinois. A real place, a real ledger, and the real origin of a pattern still shaping paychecks today. And you, still paying somebody before you see your own money? Now you know the mechanism's name, and better, you know where to look to measure it. The deepest lesson buried at Pullman was never really about rent. It was about who gets to decide the terms of your own labor. And real financial freedom starts with seeing who's deciding those terms for you. History shows that question is always worth asking again. A town built on order gave way to a strike gave way to a holiday, and that holiday still shows up on your calendar every September, a quiet reminder of a fight most people never learned the details of. Next time, we dig into the Depression-era law that invented the minimum wage, and the loopholes still written into it today. If this kind of financial history helps you see your own paycheck differently, hit subscribe and join us here. The Financial Archaeology keeps digging into how to build wealth by understanding the systems that were built long before you were. We post a new dig every week, and we'd love to have you along for the next one. So here's the question worth sitting with. If your income and your housing depended on the exact same employer tomorrow, would you feel secure or exposed? I want to know your opinion in the comments.